welcome to Robbie Richter, who's going to talk to us on the history of the Gawler Airfield. Welcome, Robbie.
Thank you, Brian. Well, Brian's already introduced me, so there's no problems there. I've been a member of the ASC, or the Adelaide Soaring Club, since 1978, and I've been an instructor there since 1985, and I've done 2 terms of Chief Flying Instructor. Now, Chief Flying Instructor is not you're the greatest. What it is, it means you're responsible. As Chief Flying Instructor, you're just in charge of standards and all the paperwork. And seeing as how I'm not real good at paperwork, never to be Chief Flying Instructor again. This subject Brian wanted me to talk on, the history of the Gawler Airfield. I've struggled with this one a bit because if you have a look on your own website, there's a well-written article. And that history that's there is actually well-written, and rather than stand up here and talk about that verbatim, I've had to come up with some form of alternative. And that didn't change. Let's go to the next slide. 1942, where it all began. On the 7th of December 1941, there was the raid on Pearl Harbor. 1942, January, was the beginning of the invasion of New Guinea. February the 15th, Singapore fell. February the 19th, there was a raid on Darwin. February the 27th, there was the Battle of the Java Sea. Now this was significant because the English, Dutch, American and Australian lost 2,300 sailors in that battle. The Japanese lost 36. That's amazing. That is amazing numbers. Australia lost their premier battleship, the cruiser Perth. It was hijacked on both sides and got torpedoed from all directions and went down very quickly with all hands lost. On March 3rd, there was a raid on Broome. On the 20th of March, there was MacArthur's speech at Traowie, I shall return. 1942, on the 31st of May, it's a couple of months on, there was a submarine attack on Pearl Harbor.
Sydney Harbour.
Sydney Harbour, sorry. Yep, Sydney Harbour. Pearl Harbor was the first one. Yep. Okay, so there was significant things happening at that stage, and it seems like the Japanese were coming through like a bucket of salt. We could hit the next one. Was it going to work? Oh yeah, it did. Now go back one. Okay, the infamous Brisbane line. I don't know whether many people have actually heard of this, but this is the Brisbane line there, drawn from Port Augusta to just above Brisbane. Conjecture as to where it actually goes from and to. Some draw the line from Perth to above Brisbane. But that line was our defence line, and the idea was that we concede the north of Australia to the Japanese and then defend it and let them work out or try and logistically keep the centre of Australia. Everyone would have seen the footage of the old diggers putting the axe through the rainwater tanks back in those days. That was real footage. So that was the idea, was to leave the Japanese with nothing in Central Australia and defend it, defend the south, where it was all populated and our industry was. Politicians denied that this line actually ever existed. There was a Royal Commission that found that it didn't exist, but there's too much written about it for it not to have existed. So that was the infamous Brisbane line. That was the reason for the birth of the Gawler Airfield. So on the 4th of April, there was land acquisition. On May the 4th, the ones written in red are the reasons why it shouldn't have been built. So we had the land acquisition, And then there was the Battle of Coral Sea, which was a victory. Then there was the Battle of Midway, which was a victory. In 1942 November, the 0523 runway, which is the longest one, we'll see that in a minute, was completed. In November 42, the Kokoda campaign began. And in February 43, the final runway was actually constructed. March 4th, in 1943, 86 Squadron was formed at Gullah. Also in March 43, MacArthur stated that the battle for Australia will be fought in New Guinea and not Australia. So that was the end of the Brisbane line. May the 1st, 1943, 86 Squadron was deployed to the Ross River and then on to New Guinea. September the 13th, 21 Squadron was formed at Gawler, and November the 25th, they were deployed to Lowood near Brisbane. And from 1943 November onwards, the airfield was only used as a satellite airfield from Malala. Okay, we've got the airfield here. Here, that's the Ward Belt Road. Here we have dispersal points. We have dispersal points there. There's a dispersal point here. And that's pretty well all the airfield was. There was a refuelling station there. There was no hangars. So there was a very, very little infrastructure at this airfield at all. So it was only just an airfield as we fairly well see it today. So, the airfield was just an airfield. There was no hangarage. There was no real buildings on the airfield at all. The only buildings, of course, were here, and that was the RAF domestic point. We had the underground bunkers here. We had another bunker there. There was a little one there that still exists today. But as you see the airfield there, that's pretty well as it sat, and as it sat for many, many years. The airfield runway dimensions, the width was 147 feet by 5,000 feet. It's reduced now to 147 by 2,900 feet due to the expressway. Interesting, what we see here, this stretch here, this whole area along here is actually the part of the runway that was annexed off from the expressway. That's the expressway up there, and the airfield proper is over the other side. This is off the Two Wells Road. It still exists, and this was only taken the other day. This was constructed by a machine borrowed from the Americans, and it produced a 21-foot wide cut, stirred up the dirt, mixed it with concrete and whatever else, and relayed it behind. Those lines are as straight as a die, almost laser cut for 5,000 feet. And there's 7 of them. So it's 7 by 21, and that was the cut that the machine made, and even to this day there's only a little bit of grass in those joins. Those bushes there and that bush is there, they are off the side of the 7 21-foot cuts. Interestingly, at 5,000 feet, it's not long enough for heavy bombers to safely operate. They can operate, but not fully loaded. Here we go. Now, 1943 86 Squadron, flying Kitty Hawk fighters, formed on March 4th and deployed on May 3rd. That's 2 months. People don't think about it. They say, oh yeah, the Kitty Hawks operated from Gawler. It was only 2 months. These guys did not learn to fly at Gawler. They were taught at Parafield, and they were only just here to learn the foibles and how to fly the Kitty Hawk. That Kitty Hawk there was one that we brought into Gullah for the finish of the 86 Squadron a few years ago, and this is 86 Squadron here in New Guinea. Similarly, the Voldy Vengeances, 21 Squadron, also were reformed after they got a hammering in Malaya. They similarly were only here for 2 months, or 2 months and 2 weeks. They were here from September the 13th, and they were deployed on November the 25th in 1943. So once again, 2 months. So that airfield was used operationally for 4 months during the wartime. Don't know how many people remember this, but that building, a lot of people local would remember that. It used to sit just beside the old bypass road. That was a firing range, and whether that was actually really used or whether they used live ammo, it was probably not. It was probably only used by pyrotechnics, if used at all. But that was the dive bombing range where they used as a firing range. Located very close to the old bypass road where the trotting track had a training track in latter years. Avro Ansons and the Airspeed Oxford. That's the Airspeed Oxford over there. It's a very pretty little aeroplane, the Airspeed Oxford. Dates back to the 1930s. This one, the Avro Anson, was not much newer. And they came from Malala and used Gawler as a remote training airfield. What we mean by remote training airfield was that Malala was the multiple engine training ground, and pilots, when you're training them, get into a fixation. They want to turn here at this height, turn here at that height, turn there at that height, and then come in and land. And they can display great skill when they're not skilled at all. So the idea of instructors were to get them away from the Malala airfield and give them a belt at Gawler just to see how good they really were. That was the idea of a remote training airfield. Various itinerant aircraft used the airfield during the war years, usually to pick up supplies. This one's a Bristol Blenheim, which is an English aeroplane. It is known that these frequented Gawler. It's not known to me what aircraft it was. There's a well-known story whereby an aircraft picked up supplies at Gawler and then was very sadly lacking in performance, and they had to unload all their cargo somewhere along the Parafault block up in One Tree Hill area to climb over the hills. So I'm not sure what sort of aircraft that was, who it was, what it was, or whether it's just a story. The Americans used the consolidated B-24 Liberator. This is the one that often flew into Gawler for supplies. Some would probably say rum running. The Yanks always ran a dry ship, and if ever you wanted anything off the Yanks, and probably the materials and equipment that were used to build the airfield was probably paid for in booze. But this is the most common aircraft to fly in. Ron Sanders, and I'm not talking about the Ron Sanders that's still alive now, I'm talking about Ron Sanders Senior that lived at Paraview, always said that these aircraft seriously shook the house when they flew over. This is a real beauty, this one. The Super Fortress. This is the aircraft, or the type of aircraft, that actually bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They are big. They are seriously large. It's the largest military aircraft to fly in and out of Gawler. This one's called Walsing Matilda, and it was on a war bomb drive, and it did drop in at Gawler. And so That's one, and that's another picture of a super fortress. Big aeroplanes. And in 1945, PO prisoners of war repatriated through Gawler, and the super fortress landed at Gawler en route through to Hobart. The Lancaster, the Avro Lancaster. Weren't too many of these in Australia, believe you me. G for George, that's in the Canberra Museum, in the Canberra War Memorial, was on a bomb drive. Now, there's nothing written to say that that actually landed at Gawler. I don't believe it did. It probably went to Parafield. But there was only two other Lancasters that I know of. There was NX622, which is in Perth, and NX611, which is in East Kirkby in England, that did the trip around Australia. But I don't believe any of them landed at Gawler. If you Google, did a Lancaster land at Gawler, it says yes, they did, and I'll show you the picture in 2 ticks. But it was probably a Lancastrian, which was the civilian or passenger carrying version of the Lancaster. A totally different animal. They were only all up weight of 20 odd tonnes, whereas the Avro Lancaster with its bomb load was 30 tonnes. So they were quite different aeroplanes in truth. And this is the one, if you Google, did a Lancaster land at Gawler? This is what they put up. Yes, a Lancaster landed at Gawler. It's not. It's a Qantas Lancastrian refuelling at Gawler. Qantas staged through Gawler prior to West Beach. Obviously when Parafield was US, due to rain. Parafield was a swamp. I can remember we sponsored a English couple out in the late 50s. From England, and he was a lamey, licensed aircraft maintenance engineer, and I remember he was in big trouble one day because he got a Dakota bogged in at Parafield, and if there's anything worse, you can't get anything worse than an aeroplane bogged in mud, believe you me. So that's the Lancastrian refuelling at Gawler, and that's a Qantas, and it's written on the side, Qantas Empire Airways, the Qantas C-87 at Gawler. There's no doubt about that. That is at Gawler. And Gawler was the only airfield that was all weather. All the rest was susceptible to wet weather. The C-87, wrong one, this is it. The C-87, I went backwards. The C-87 is a civilian converted use of a B-24, which is one of the American light bombers. And that is as it was used by Qantas. Obviously there was a big flood of these aircraft after the war, and they were used by the airlines. My God, I wouldn't want to have paid for the petrol being one of about 40 passengers on that, believe you me. Probably only 20 passengers. TAA built a small terminal at Gawler, and the DC-3, which is the civilian use of a Dakota, a military Dakota, and the DC-4 were visitors when Parafield was awash. This fact actually continued, this landing of aircraft at Gawler continued up until West Beach was constructed in 1954. Now we come to something a little more sinister. Radio Gawler. This is the interior of the Gawler radio whilst under construction. It was 136 foot long by 30 foot wide. It was built of reinforced concrete and it was wholly underground. There were two others of similar dimensions. There was one on the Two Wells Road and there was another on Clancy Road. This is the Clancy Road. As you can see, it's partially underground. Flying over it last week, it doesn't look terribly different. That is a good landmark and these vents are still there. And this is the Clancy Road bunker as seen from Clancy Road as it exists today. Back in the 1960s, there was a huge antenna farm all the way around that and around in existing paddocks of the size you would hardly believe. This photograph, although not labelled like Brian's ones on Dr. Dawes, isn't listed or described, but it is almost certainly the interior of the radio at Clancy Road. In 1944, the Adelaide Wireless Telegraph transferred from Adelaide. 1945, it was renamed Gawler Communications. It had 200 staff, but this photograph was probably in Adelaide prior to 1944. Fat fingers. Now we come to the interesting bit. This is at Gawler, there's no doubt about that. As you can see, it's accredited by the Australian War Memorial and listed as such. The girls are working here, obviously on keys. This is the interesting bit. This piece here. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 out of scene 6. 6 units there that these girls were at. But just check it. It's got a gauge, it's got a dial, it's got 2 switches, da 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 da. Here we go. We've got a dial, gauge, 2 switches, da da. Okay. This is the reception set number 1 Australia. It was a special communications receiver designed for the interception, reception in special wireless sections and for general communications within the above corps. I won't go through the rest of that, but what it does say there, it has got an enormous range, probably 20 times more than most transceivers. This was a powerful multi-range transceiver. One could be said ridiculously so. It came on in 1944 when the airfield was only partially used. In 1944 there were only itinerant aircraft and the odd one coming in from Malala. The airfield was not used really at that stage, it was redundant. So, what do we make of that? I'll throw in a curved ball here. And throw in a real curved ball. To tell you the honest truth, and to use a colloquialism, bugger all is written. Okay? This is a letter from Ian Lobban, who was the head of GCHQ, he's the director of GCHQ in England. GCHQ is Bletchley Park. It's the fact that Bletchley Park was at the centre of its own worldwide web, a web of radio and teleprinter links on which intercepted messages were forwarded to Bletchley Park for decryption. And key material was forwarded all around the world to stations and special wireless units, British and Dominion. You helped create ties that bind us to this day. I, alongside my staff, am particularly pleased that ex-servicemen and women from the Commonwealth and the US are receiving this award. That's the award, a medal from Bletchley Park. As you can see, it's got Bletchley Park and its outstations, 39 to 45, and it's got GCCS, which is it's a government cipher and cipher school. Okay, so we've got that. The question's got to be asked. 56 section in Perth, 56 Australian Special Wireless Group in Perth. It was a big section, and it was a very important section. My mother was attached to that. Had 7 AR7 radio units. It had 6 teleprinters, and there was 34 AWAS, Australian Women's Auxiliary Service staff. Gawler unit in the RAF had 12 AR7 units. They had 12 teleprinters, and they had 200 staff. Why? The airfield wasn't used. It wasn't to direct aeroplanes in. Simply wasn't. Okay, so we'll move on from that. We've got another piece of paper here. When we get to it. Next slide here. Okay. This one comes under radio security, and it came from Colonel F.J.M. Stretton, Royal Signals. This is POMS, this is not American, these are English. Don't trust the English when it comes to security. Attached is a copy of a report which Colonel Stretton has submitted to the Attorney General as Minister in charge of Security for Services on the subject of detection of illicit radio transmissions from Australia. So, the summary of recommendations: the responsibility for detecting illicit radio transmissions to and from Australia shall remain vested in the Post Office. Remember, this was Post Office, right? Post Office. Acting for this purpose under the control of the Director General of Security. That at least one station be set up to intercept radio traffic unidentified nature and origin. That the present intercept stations at Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth be closed or enlarged in staff as may be settled from time to time by the Director General of the Post Office, setting on the advice of the Director General of Security. So, that a discrimination unit be formed under the Director General of Security to study the intercepts and to arrange the program of work of the intercept stations. That's top secret. Well, was. Next slide, Ian. Thanks. There we are, go back one. This is top secret, once again. As you can see, it says top secret. Basically, it says, for the purposes of 3 types of field sections were employed, viz. RAF wireless units, Australian Army wireless units, and American signal radio intelligence companies. And this was interception of raw materials inaudible from rear areas for cryptographic solution by the General Bureau. The General Bureau was Bletchley Park. There's another one here. Just as interesting. February, March 1943, Colonel Stretton, Royal Signals, visited Australia and wrote the report. A discrimination section of 1 officer and 6 others ranks would be formed by the Army under the control of SC&C. The discrimination section would receive a copy of all Army logs, now coming in and out of the special wireless sections, as a routine. Arrangements will be made with the RAAF for the interchange of logs. In addition, logs can also be received from the Post Office. So we've got a discrimination unit set up that's intercepting radio signals. So I'm actually next slide here. Back one. I'm actually asserting here. Go on the website. You've got it going now, haven't you, Brian? Go on the website and look up the Observation Centre for Radio Security Organisations. During World War II, the Director General of Post and Telegraphs made available observation centres across Australia. Observation centres for Radio Security Organisation were located in the following locations: Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth. I clicked on Perth. I knew where it was. They had very little on it. Click on Adelaide, you get this. Can anyone tell me where the Adelaide Observation Centre was? Nobody knows. It's just... Look, it was top secret. It lasted a long time. It was declassified when Gordon Brown was the Prime Minister. My mother got the letter. She was suffering from dementia at the time. Said, what's this? An invitation to somewhere, you deal with it. And it was that commendation, medal, and all that. And Mum didn't know. Okay, let's move on. Okay, go back one. Ian, just quickly. These are the girls, go back a couple, just go back a couple, we just went through a bit.
It's doing itself.
Yeah, okay, now, one ahead. These are the girls at work at Gawler. They probably didn't know what they were receiving, what they were sending, or anything at all. Have a look at the next one. That's the teleprinters. Why do you need teleprinters at a radio station? These teleprinters were obviously connected to such places as Americans in Hawaii and Bletchley Park in England. There's no doubt about that at all. But go back to those. That was just a group of the Australian Women's Auxiliary Services that actually manned the radio, gathered the stuff together, and sent it off. They didn't know what they were gathering. They didn't know what they were sending, but they did it anyway. Okay, so that's the radio section. Two Wells Road bunker. This was one of 7 bunkers. There were 6 others of similar dimensions. Bomb bunkers? No, they're not big enough. They're certainly nowhere near big enough. A single Lancaster would have been able to carry more bombs than one of these bunkers could hold. So my guess is that they were used for pyrotechnics or practice shells or practice bombs or something. But they certainly, if you compare the size of these things with what's down at Penfield, they were babies. The bunker on 2 Wells Road, of course, was not used for anything else other than generating electricity. The Australian built Ford V8 generator. There were 7 of these at the Gawler radio section. There was 2 on the 2 Wells Road, there was 2 at Clancy Road, there was 2 at the underground bunker where the radio unit was, and there was this one at the 2 Wells Road bunker, and this one was actually used to power the lights on the airfield. So, there we go. All bunkers were the same. This is the interior of the one at the on the 2 Wells Road. As you can see, it probably didn't look like that back during 1942-43. Marilyn Tucker remembers very well that her grandfather, Cliffy Ayling, was purloined into building these bunkers, and indeed the big bunker, and every concrete structure around, as were many local tradies. But the bunkers were only 7 metres by 5 metres, so they weren't particularly large. This is an interesting one. It's described in the website on the history of the Gawler Airfield as a direction finder. It certainly wasn't a direction finder, but it was a collector and distributor of signals from the remote stations. The direction finder was Clancy Road. Let's get that one straight. That was the direction finder. And it could pinpoint a line. And that's another reason why you've got to be thinking that it's a covert listening station. But here, from this little tank, whatever, multiple wires were encased in lead. And that's a picture of what it looks like from the Two Wells Road. That's a picture of what it looks like from the Northern Expressway. This archaeology or bolts are near the base. There's another one over the other side of it. So there was something above it, bolted down fairly solidly. On the inside of it, there's these. There's 5 of them. They're in 4-inch steel tubes. 4-inch steel tubes. They're a lead pipe wrapped in tar rag. There's the lead pipe wrapped in tar rag. Copper shielding in there. Another lead pipe and another copper wire in the middle of it. So it certainly points to a shielded aerial cable of some description. Hello, I've got something here. Okay. Next slide we have. (1946). The comms was disbanded in Gawler. On the 11th of October 1945, Lieutenant Colonel Sanford of the Central Bureau requested advice from Army Headquarters on the allocation of personnel after the closure of the Special Wireless Type. It said here, it is suggested that since Central Bureau is shortly to be disbanded, steps should be taken to ascertain for how long the Defence Committee desires the Directorate of Military Intelligence to continue with its commitments in regarding to radio security. It is believed that little information of value has been obtained from this source from some time, and it is probable that the Signal Officer-in-Chief will desire that either to close down its special wireless sections and to divert the personnel to other tasks. This is 1946. It's amazing that the Gawler wireless section dates of coming online and going offline. Remember, this is top secret, and it's dated on the 15th of October 45. Signal Officer-in-Chief advised that No. 1 discrimination unit now be closed down. The dates of the formation and the closure of the Gawler section coincide exactly with that discrimination unit. So, 46 disbanded. 1950, the Adelaide Soaring Club commenced gliding at Gawler. 1954 up to, used as an alternate to Parafield when closed due to weather. 1955, Edinburgh RAF constructed as well as the DSTO. The airfield was transferred from the, to the DCA from the Department of Civil Aviation from the Defence Department. Interesting section there. In 1988, it was transferred from the Department of Civil Aviation to the Council of Light. Just a fact, West Beach construction began in 1947. Flights began in 1954. It was 7 years. Gawler took 11 months to construct. Such is wartime, I suppose. 1947 and up to 58, the camp, which is this section here, was used as a migrant hostel. This fact and part of the airfield is well covered and very well detailed in the National Trust Museum. And it's also in a book titled This'll Do. I've only included this because it's the only photograph that I can find of the TAA terminal. That building still existed up until 2010. We used it. It was a toilet block and a lounge. We actually still used it as a toilet block up until 2010, and it was our bar area. 47 to 51, little known history. There was no racing tracks at Gawler. There was no The Bend. There was no Adelaide City circuit. The Gawler Airfield was actually a speed meeting. It was a racetrack. And there's details of this racetrack on the web, and there's a very well written article in Old Bike magazine regarding what bikes, who rode them, and so forth and so forth. So let's have a look at that. Laurie Jamieson, well-known name. Anyone that followed Speedway would know Laurie Jamieson. On the DKW bike, and Doug Whiteford driving the Largo Talbot. That was at Gawler. Notice there's nothing in between the crowd and the racing cars. I doubt whether you'd get anything like that today. Racing at Gawler ceased upon the opening of the Port Wakefield circuit. Okay, we'll have a look at the next one, which was just simply the race circuit layout. As you can see, it's down runway T3 and extended into runway 3-1 a bit. Now, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, we'll hold that one for a while. The transfer from the District Council, from the Department of Civil Aviation to the District Council Light. We had golden years with the DCA. We had a bar that had no rules. We're on Commonwealth ground. If something went wrong with the airfield, we just bring up and say, windsock's broken. So, duly, a new windsock had arrived. And then we had this transfer to the District Council of Light in 1988. There was a caveat on it. The airfield had to remain for a minimum of 15 years. It was handed over for sporting aviation and gliding in particular. Now there was a problem here. District Council of Light had never owned an airfield. The Adelaide Soaring Club had run it for 38 years. So, a bit of a power struggle here. I think initially the District Council of Light was looking at it as a bit of a cash cow, but it certainly wasn't. If the airfield was disposed of after 15 years, a similar facility had to be supplied within the council district for the aviation purposes. A fair bit of a caveat on there by the federal government. An airfield advisory committee was established and met monthly. Interesting group. There was Des Shanahan. Bruce Eastick was on it. Remember that, Bruce? Well done. Ross Dawkins was on it. A guy by the name of Peter Sesko was on it. Ken Lovell was on it. The CEO of Light was on it. And I was on it. The Adelaide Soaring Club loaded this committee. We got our way a little bit. But anyway, so it took a lot and a steep learning curve for the District Council of Light to work out what, how and how you run an airfield, and that was done by Airfield Design. That's our consultant. Dip Tie wanted the whole caveat of the airfield removed. He wanted the expressway to run right through the guts. DCA and the Commonwealth Government stepped in and only partially removed the caveat and actually insisted on doing certain remedial work so that Dip Tie didn't get their own way. DCA then reinstated the caveat with stronger terms. From 1988 to 2019, the Adelaide Soaring Club only had short-term leases. In 2013, the CFS started operations and had built some infrastructure on the field. 2019, the Light Council probably realised that a housing estate was a pipe dream on that site. Let's face it, there was a 30-year plan. In that 30-year plan, Springwood would be complete, Calbeba would be built, Concordia would be started, Roseworthy would be completed, Buckland Park would be finished. Sorry, none of those have actually happened. So what's happened now, in 2019, the the District Council of Light realised it's too hard. We are now 1 year into a 42-year lease. That went backwards, didn't it? There we go. That's the airfield as it exists today. This black bit up here, that photo was taken in December 2015, and that, of course, is the remnants of the pinery fire. So that's exactly how it exists today. Be careful what you ask for. There's been many calls to close the airfield, a lot by people who get a little bit cheesed off, particularly competition times when we have a little bit more activity with our aeroplanes. The airspace around Gawler, and indeed all around, is at a premium. That's military, civilian. We fly in the military zone. They allow us to fly there. There's that damn pointer. The military allow us to have this area here. There's been many applications for Parafield to do training in there, and indeed do touch and goes at Gawler Airfield. Because it's for sporting aviation, commercial operators have been able to be kept out. The fact is, if you close down this aerodrome, this area here will become either a training ground for Parafield or a training ground for the RAF. So that's what I mean. So those people that think that they're going to have a quiet time if they close down the Adelaide Soaring Club, it's strange, you know. Parafield are allowed to fly in there, but because there's gliders there, they stay away in droves. They won't come anywhere near us. They just don't understand. Aeroplanes that came to Gullah, the RG DC-3 was a regular visitor. Next slide. We'll zap through this pretty quick. Various private and sport aircraft have joined us. Next slide. From the fastest to the slowest. It's not very often, but we do get these little fellas in. By gee, they're quick, and do they stir up the dust? Okay, next one in. In 2016, the RAF did a complete survey, including a test on the surface, and the result was yes, the C-130 could actually, the C-130 could be landed at Gawler, but it couldn't operate fully loaded. The one with the multiple aeroplanes was the Samson Flatfire, 5 aeroplanes waiting to load. There were 18 bombers operated from Gawler, and there were 3 spotter planes and 2 helicopters. This one here is an air tractor taking off, and it's about to cross the Northern Expressway, and I'm sure some drivers would have got a very close look at the bottom of an aircraft on that one. Next slide, Ian, if we can get to it. Job well done, Gypsy Lady, 2015. After the Samson Flatfire, security, there they were over there, didn't move away from it. They sat there and looked at it for 2 days. Okay, we can quickly go on to the next lot. Aviation, the Soaring Club started in 1944, next one in. 46. The club's first aircraft flew at O'Halloran and Hill, and in 46 operations at One Tree Hill in Virginia. Next one in, we'll go through this. In 1950, the operation started at Gawler Aerodrome with 3 types of launch offered: aerotow, winch and autotow. Next one in. In 1950 to 1960, the Adelaide Soaring Club helped establish 7 gliding clubs. They were Woomera, Balaclava, Port Wakefield, Port Perry, Mount Gambier, Murray Bridge and Barossa. The Adelaide Soaring Club was the premier club in Australia. We had Schneider's Manufacturing on the airfield. Next one in. In 1958, the National Gliding School was established, and Gawler Airfield was the base. The gliding school is where there was all training, including instructors and aircraft engineers. Maintenance engineers. Next one in. Good. Club flying, 76 to 2019. This is my era. how things have changed. The ones on the left were my training aircraft. The ones on the right is a modern twin-seater. I've got 30 hours in Z1. Probably got a hell of a lot more in those others on the left. The ones on the left were made of wooden canvas and steel tube canvas covered. These days you could buy an airworthy one for about $6,000. The one on the right, latest model Arcus. It has an engine. It's fully self-launching. It's made of the most modern composite materials that you can get. It's fully equipped with flight computers and radar, etc. And as it sits there, $500,000.
Well,
So it's a monster machine. Next slide, Ian. The instrumentation on the old ones on the left, we've got a airspeed indicator in the centre at the top, a altimeter, an altimeter, a radio, and a G meter. A G meter is for aerobatics. ZBX, that's Z1 over there. You've got on the left, you've got the airspeed indicator. Underneath that, you've got the altimeter. Below that, that is the full engine controls, including everything: temperature, tacho, starting, closing, you name it, it's there. Along the bottom of the fuses. It's got a radio on the bottom right corner. It's got a manual vario and an electric vario, and in the middle, it's a full laptop. That tells you everything, including where you are, how high you are, how far the ground is below you, how high you need to be to get home, you name it, it tells you. Okay, next slide. That was the fleet in 1976 when I joined the club. We have there 4 twins, 5 single-seaters and 3 tow planes. Today we have 3 twin-seaters, 3 single-seaters, 2 tow planes, as well as a fleet of light sport aircraft. Next slide, Ian. In the year 2000, we embraced the light sport aircraft movement. You got it back, good. And the reason we did that in the year 2000 was that we were starting to lose members to Parafield who were, gliding's pretty exerting. You've got to push these damn things around and you've got to have people to help you fly them and so forth. Whereas an aeroplane, you don't. You get in it and start it up and fly. So there was that incentive to actually embrace the light sport aircraft movement. Okay, next slide, Ian. I'm going to blow the bags a little bit of the Adelaide Soaring Club here. The club owns 3 hangars and 2 clubroom buildings. We have club aircraft, 2 Papa Paulinese, 3 single-seaters, 3 twin single-seaters, as well as 4 Jabiru LSA and a Rocco LSA, total of 13 aircraft. We have 48 private hangars, 27 gliders, 37 LSA and 15 other aircraft. We have a total of 328 flying members. 28 members are gliding instructors, 8 are LSA instructors. This is the interesting bit. We give out between $10,000 and $18,000 worth of scholarships per year. We administer scholarships from the Air League and the Air Force to the tune of $4,000 to $8,000 a year. 16 members have military flying careers, 18 members have commercial flying careers, 5 in aviation support. 3 members are international competition pilots. We have the world champion from 2016, and currently we have both the GFA President and Secretary as members. In regard to the scholarships, I got this email. Rob, I would love to point out how much the club has helped me and to say how much I appreciate the opportunities that I've been given. When I first came flying at 15, I fell in love with it. But school and a part-time job, there was no way I could possibly afford another flight, let alone learn to fly. I've been the recipient of both sponsorships initially and several scholarships. These opportunities have allowed me to start from nothing, to progress through my first solo, my A, B and C certificates, cross-country rating, passenger and aerobatic rating, and eventually becoming an air experience instructor. I was fortunate enough to receive a scholarship to go to the Junior Nationals, Joey Glide, and whilst I didn't actually compete, I learned so much from that opportunity to be in a competition environment and learning from some of the best glider pilots. Overall, I can't even say how thankful I am for all of those opportunities, for the club members that made it possible. I still don't know who sponsored me in the beginning, but I am so grateful. So that's what we do. Not all the time, I must admit. Next slide here. These are the typical sort of thing. If you can fly in that, if you're flying along here, you would just keep going up and 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 up. As long as that wave is going up, a glider will go up. As long as you stay in that area. If you stay in this area, it goes down. That's the theory. This one over here is a very, very strange one. It happens down, it's often caught down in South America, but that is a whirlwind that goes up to ridiculously high heights. And of course, then you've got the stratospheric mountain waves, and we're talking these up here. Okay, next slide. Ian. The Airbus Perlin. The Perlin project. It's sponsored by both NASA and Airbus, and it will eventually explore the edge of space to a height of 125,000 feet. Now, bearing in mind an airliner flies at 38,000 feet. So they've got their sights set on 125,000 feet. And they're going to do that by riding that polar vortex, which is that great big whirlwind that I showed you back there before. Next slide, Ian. The original one was this one here, height record. Virgin, what's his name? The scruffy guy with a beard. And a guy by the name of Fawcett flew that one to 51,651 feet. Yeah, so that was that. This is the beginning of the Perlin project. This is the U2, 72,000 feet. The Blackbird, 85,000 feet. The Perlin has already got to 90,000 feet. That's a glider. That's not a powered plane. That just rides the air currents, right? So we've got to 90,000 feet. They want 125,000 feet. Aeronautically, they reckon that's the finish of it. They won't be able to get any higher. Questions? I've finished, Brian.
I'll now ask
Did you want to?
Gary Ironmonger to do the motivation.
Well, thanks very much, Robin, for the extensive talk on the Gawler Airfield and also on the Adelaide Soaring Club. It was interesting to hear what you had to say tonight, and also the fact that, in 1942, when the aerodrome actually first started, it was only used for 4 months in wartime, and also that it had a multitude of different aircraft that actually used it over the course of its life, and it's still going, obviously. One of the things that I found very interesting was the Clancy Road radio bunker, because about 30 years ago, I used to live on Parker's Road, which was just across Clancy Road. Yeah. And about 30 years ago, that block of land was actually up for sale. And a friend and I, we went down to the bunker, and it was just a raw bunker at that stage. And we walked down about 17 steps, and there was all this mud and all sorts of stuff in there, feral pigeons and dead rabbits and stuff like that. So he actually got an inheritance and bought that block of land and turned that into a 2-bedroom home. Yes. It's got an ensuite and a couple of bathrooms and also a lounge room. So
I could live there.
Yeah, underground. He's living living underground, and I've visited that radio bunker on many occasions. So, but really, on behalf of the Gullah History team, thank you very much for your presentation tonight. I've got a small gift to give you, if I can dig it out from here. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you all for listening.